Welcome guys. So following some requests from yourself asking for some videos just talking a little bit about the exam, particularly as we're getting close to the January exams, I thought I'd do a very quick video going through some of the things that I've picked up from teaching the exam unit, and I've done a little bit of marking in the past just to give you some ideas of what I've found. As I say, hopefully it might just give you a bit of an insight. I'm not expecting it to be anything massively detailed or comprehensive, but as I say, if you do want something specific, just leave a comment on the video or just obviously send a message on the YouTube channel. That'd be fantastic. So let's get going. So the first thing about the layout of the paper, that's what I think we should focus on first of all. Now this exam is an odd one, particularly from the other subjects I teach, that the exam has a very loose structure in the sense that there are 3 sections to it, all worth 30 marks, so A, B and C, and generally they all start off with a case study. So in the beginning of section A, you'll be given a case study with a context, with some characters, with a story, which will then kind of frame the next 30 questions. At the beginning of section B, the case study, the context, it changed. So a new character is introduced, or the focus shifts to a different person in the family or the group. And the following 30 questions focus on them. And then there is the section C, which again, the situation changes once more. New people are added, people are changed, focus is changed, and then the questions tend to relate to that context. Not specifically every single time, but the general theme follows that. Now, in section A, the first 20 marks is a combination of questions that are made up of 1 markers, 2 markers, 4 markers, 6 markers, and it can be anything from that 1 to 6 range. And then there'll be 1 10 marker at the end of A. Section B, the first 10 marks is anything between 1 and 6 markers, so the 1, 2, 4, 6. Generally the combination tends to be a 2, 4, 4 or a 4, 6, and then you get 2 10 markers. And section C follows the same pattern. 10 marker of general questions, 1 to 6 markers, generally 2, 4, 4 or 4, 6, and then 10, 10. But as I say, there is no formal structure from what I've gathered, so this could change and shift, but I doubt it would deviate too much from this. It's also worth noting that the paper is 90 marks, and it takes 90 minutes, so it's mark a minute. So when you're facing a 10 marker, you'd spend 10 minutes. If it's a 1 mark question, 1 minute, 6 marker, 6 minutes. Now, in this exam, there aren't that many topics, so there are going to be common themes that I found when it comes to the questions that tend to be asked. So in this exam unit, the content you've covered, in section A, you've got pies and growth and development. So it's the physical growth, you've got the gross and fine motor skills, childhood, puberty, pregnancy, perimenopause, menopause, aging. You've got the theories like Chomsky, Bowlby, Piaget, and self-esteem, self-concept. Section B is all about environmental factors. Nature, nurture, genetic diseases. You've got Gessel, Bandura, the stress diaphysis model, housing, social factors, economic factors, stress, major life events, and the Holmes-Ray readjustment rating scale. And then section Z is aging. So physical aging, social factors, economic factors, psychological, and the main thinkers is Havikhurst and Henry and Cunning. So as I say, as a topic, there is masses of content here, particularly for 90 marks worth of questions. So what I've noticed looking over past papers is there generally are themes and types of question they ask. So I'm just going to flag up a few of these short answer themes just to you. So the first is graph questions. Every single paper seems to have a graph question on it. It could be, as you can see, the average mean age of mothers. It could be looking at, people with asthma in Britain. It could be NEAT rates. There are loads of questions, and they always have a graph. Now, these questions, they may look scary at first, but really all they're asking you to do is pick out a piece of information from a graph. There's nothing too complicated. So looking at this first question on the left-hand side here, it says the average age of mothers at the birth of their first child. Well, first child is the first column. We've got 28.8. That's not too, hopefully, not too difficult. Second question is the difference of mothers between their second and their third child. So you'd look at the second child, which is 30.9 is the average. The third child, 31.9. Do a bit of maths. The difference being 1 year. So obviously you just take those two away from each other. Again, what's the percentage of 16-year-olds who are NEET in England? So again, we'd look at the 16 to 18-year-olds, which is the darker line. We're looking for England, and it's obviously 2016. So 8.7 is our answer here. What's the difference between the percentage of 16 or 18 year-old NEETs and 24 19-year-old NEETs? So again, it's 16.2 minus 8.7. That would be our difference. So again, these questions, they're not asking generally anything too difficult. It's to often look at the data, what's it show, what's the answer. Puberty is a question topic that they tend to use a lot. It seems to be obviously one that comes up quite frequently. So obviously with this one, we've got this question about Mary and Patrick. They're obviously about their life stages. So obviously that's a slightly different question, but it's this one here. They outline the 4 changes that will be happening. So Mary being 13, based on the case study, she'd be going through puberty. So you give 4 characteristics, 4 physical things that would happen during puberty. Another question, 2 primary, 2 secondary characteristics of puberty. So again, looking at the puberty is a good one to look at. I think what's also been worth noting is the primary and secondary differences. So obviously when I was looking at this, present at birth would be the primary, everything that's present at birth but not active until puberty. Secondary would be everything that develops as puberty begins or during puberty. Also in terms of body hair, it's too general, too sort of vague body hair, because that could be the hair on your head, it could be the hair on your face, it could be under your arms, on your back. It doesn't specify what type of body hair you're actually talking about. So also you'd have to say, as it says in the answer scheme here, pubic hair. Be very specific, or facial hair, but obviously just be conscious of the gender. Obviously nipples is my dilemma. I don't know whether they would count as a primary, because obviously they're present from birth, but then for girls they change during pregnancy, puberty. So I've always had the nipple dilemma, so maybe avoid that potentially. The only other points it flags up here is puberty. Just saying puberty isn't a feature of puberty, because that's what you're going through, and menstruation on its own I don't think necessarily would be worth it. You'd have to say that menstruation would begin, and obviously that's a feature, but obviously that's a characteristic, menstruation beginning. Milestones and motor skills, again, tends to pop up a lot. So as you can see on the screen, you know, the 4 physical milestones that Molly, who is 2, is going to go through at this life stage. So what would be physically happening? And again, you'd have to identify the correct order. So it might be lifting head, rolling over, crawling, standing, walking. You know, it's working your way through what physically milestone developments will take place. Josh can jump on 1 foot. So what's the difference between gross and fine motor skills? They tend to look at those a lot. Identify the correct 4 stages that Josh has gone through. The 4 stages that follow early childhood. Concepts of growth and development. Gross motor skills that you develop. Fine motor skills. So again, they tend to ask these a lot, so look at those. Religion is one that has popped up a couple of times on the paper. And I think these are quite tricky questions, because it may not be a topic that you've explicitly studied in depth. And I know sometimes when I've done this with my students, we haven't really got to or touched massively on religion. So what I've got here, 2 questions that came up. So one was about Roxy had friends from different cultures and religions, and it was asking to think about how religion would impact on diet and how it would impact on medical intervention. So again, you'd have to be, because it's the 1+1 questions, be specific in them. So as you see, you know, if you're from a Jewish background or a Muslim background, you wouldn't eat pork. That's how it would affect your diet. In terms of medical impacts, Jehovah's Witnesses would refuse medical assistance, blood transfusions. So it's trying to be specific. This is the religion, this is the influence. And the same with Amir, who goes to the mosque every Friday to pray. 2 ways religion may positively impact on diet. So again, this was a really weird question, and it threw a lot of students, because obviously you have to be very specific. So obviously obviously Amir being Muslim, he would not consume pork, as it says in that previous question. And then you'd have to say how that would benefit him health-wise. So the idea that it's a reduction in fatty foods and it can risk obesity and other health conditions. It could be that, you know, based on the religion, they don't consume alcohol, which would reduce liver disease. They may not smoke, so that would reduce lung disease, heart disease. So it's trying to be very specific about the religion and then the impact on health. Some specific questions tend to be more medical based. So again, we had this one about 2 possible effects of air pollution on physical health. So it was really what they wanted to see was how pollution, and also that's car pollution and pollution, obviously fumes, would affect health, and they wanted very specific answers. So breathing in the fumes could increase risk of lung cancer, heart disease, risk of strokes. It could have an impact on organs and cause illnesses and diseases. So COPD, those kind of conditions, they want very specific. And also the other than asthma was a key thing here. So if you wrote about asthma, you wouldn't get any marks. Outline 2 reasons why Taslia won't go to antenatal classes. So again, you were talking about a 47-year-old woman who was pregnant with her, I think it was her 3rd child, possibly, based on the story. And she didn't want to go to antenatal classes. And again, this was a very broad question because obviously it sort of gave you some hints in the item that she works long hours, she doesn't drive, she lives outside on the outskirts of London. So a lot of the questions was, you know, you could say that, you know, she's working long hours, where it means that she's very difficult to get time off to attend the classes. The fact she doesn't drive would mean she'd have to rely on public transport. She may not want to do that and risk injury or getting lost or hurt. Living on the outskirts of London means that she may find it difficult to travel into London, possibly for antenatal sessions. The fact that she's on I believe it's her 3rd child, she may not want to attend because she's already raised 2 children. So again, there was a little bit of flexibility there on the mark scheme. And then 3 lifestyle factors during pregnancy that would affect the physical development of a baby. Now again, this was a question where there was a little bit of specific medical terminology they wanted to use. So the physical effects would be, you know, smoking, drinking, poor diet. And again, what they wanted was, you know, drinking would cause fetal alcohol syndrome. Drug use could cause addiction in babies that are born. Smoking while pregnant can lead to stunted growth or asthma in children. So it was kind of asking for very specific factors, but also interestingly, positive things could be used. So if you talked about, you know, being active and doing lots of exercise, that could prepare the body and help people prepare for childbirth and ensure they're physically fit. So let's move towards the 10 markers, just a few ideas to come up with those. So with the 10 markers, there are some command words. I know these aren't all of them, but these are the 4 that I've noticed tend to be used quite frequently with a 10 marker. So discuss, evaluate, justify, and to what extent. Now, discuss questions, it says write about a topic in detail, taking into account the issues and the ideas and their importance. For me, that I kind of said it as just write about a topic, discuss what's going on, write about what you know. So you're just outlining all the detail about an issue. To evaluate, it says bring all the relevant information you have on a topic together, make a judgment on it. Your judgment should clearly support or be supported by information you've gathered. So I kind of see that as the first one, discuss. So write about an issue plus make a judgment. Is it good? Is it bad? Successful? Unsuccessful? Is it an advantage? A disadvantage? Justify says give reasons to support the point your answer is making. These reasons should clearly support the argument you're making. So I think this kind of leans towards the write about a topic and discuss what's going on, but outline specifically why you've made these points. What has it got to do? So you've got to justify a theory or an idea, link it to an argument. So kind of make sure the reasoning that you're talking about something, the connection you might be making between 2 points is clear. And then last but not least, you get the what extent, to what extent, which is to assess the evidence and present an argument clearly, coming to a conclusion about the level of importance of something and how it might impact on an event. I think this is basically the same as evaluate. So you're going to talk about a topic, put all the information in, talk about the strengths, talk about the weaknesses, but lastly, the judgment is, is it important? Does it have an impact? How beneficial it is? What's it got to do with what you're talking about? So again, there's a few of the key command words. So let's take a look at some questions. So with the 10 markers, there are different types I've noticed again of 10 markers. They're not clear cut, they're not always going to be this way, but there are general themes that I've spotted looking over question papers. So you might get specific theory questions, whether the question specifically tells you the theory or it massively hints towards one. So you can see here you've got this question talking about the Holmes-Ray readjustment scale. So that's about stress and the impact of stress, and it's kind of telling you to talk about the Holmes-Ray scale. So you might talk about, as I say, because it's a discuss and the effects of stress on health. How can stress affect health? What's going on? I'd start off by talking about what the Holmes-Ray scale is, talk about the impact of stress. You can talk about predictable life events, unpredictable, and obviously the positive and negative things that stress can do. We've got the impact of unpredictable life events. So as above, life events, major life events, would probably bring in the Holmes-Ray scale. There's a bit of theory there. And then to what extent can stress be positive for health and well-being? So again, it's that motivational factor, the adrenaline that comes from it. So again, it would be a question where, particularly in that, to what extent you would make a judgment. So overall, is stress positive for health and well-being? You might say to it's only positive for health and well-being to a limited extent, actually has more of an impact that's negative on individuals. Other questions, again, more specific theory. So questions about language, obviously that's going to lead towards Chomsky. Attachment is going to be Bowlby. And then you've got a question here about Piaget. Now again, this is a justify question. So again, it's the Piaget's theory of stages to explain cognitive development. So again, how does Piaget's theory explain cognitive development? And you justify how much of an impact and how that helps to understand it. Aging tends to pop up quite frequently as well. So again, evaluate the impact of aging on society. Now again, this one is quite a broad aging question because it's asked about the effect of aging. But if you're thinking about theories we've done, you've got Havinghurst, Cummings, and Henry would be theories on aging. But that's more. It's kind of a little bit geography, sociology. If you've done demography and the impact of an aging population and the increase in demand for healthcare. So it's a slightly odd question, but it's semi-related to what you would have covered potentially. You've got this question about a lady going into a care home. So again, assess, very similar to evaluate. You're going to talk about the positives and the negatives of her moving into a care home. How that's going to maybe improve her health, but also how it can have a negative impact on her health. Throwing in theories again, you could throw in the Havinghurst and Cummings and Henry. You could throw in Bowlby and attachment. You could throw in Holmes-Ray and stress. So you could throw in quite a few there. And then to what extent does later adulthood lead to decrease in social physical activity? So essentially, again, thinking about aging and later adulthood, how does aging later, how likely is it to lead to this decline? And again, you're going to say whether it does or doesn't. So that's a kind of a little bit about the physical changes, but again, a bit of theory could be thrown in too. And then you also get these general health questions. So again, we've got Patrick who's retired. So what's the impact of retirement and increase the leisure time on Patrick's health? So how is that going to, again, evaluate what's the positives and negatives of increased leisure time? So, more freedom, reduction in stress, but then you could throw in a little bit of theory with the attachment, decline of a role and connection. You can even throw in, say, the Havinghurst, the aging theories. And then this is an interesting question again, to what extent, so again, how much does being wealthy and have a demanding job make it hard to have a healthy lifestyle? So again, the wealthy bit I think is kind of tricky because obviously having money generally gives you more opportunities to have a healthy lifestyle in terms of healthy diet, gym membership, healthcare. But it's the demanding job, reducing time, increasing stress, meaning you're more likely to eat junk food. Particularly if you've got more money, you're more likely to eat takeaways. Obviously, I think the question you could lean towards the, having money, disposable income for dangerous activities, for drugs, for drinks. So again, it's kind of how much does having money make it difficult or easy to have a healthy lifestyle. Last but not least, I know this video is going on a little bit now. My main 10 sort of tips, like I say, not 10 tips, my main 6 tips here for facing a 10 marker. So start off, read the question, read the item. I know you've got 10 minutes, but maybe take 1 minute to read the item, read the question, and then move on. As my second point says, to make a plan. What are you going to say? What's the theory? What's the question asking? So think about what you are going to say. Don't just jump straight in and attack the question without having some time to think about what you need to do. When you're writing, refer back to, link to the context, the case study, the point of the question. So try and make sure what you're saying is relevant to what you're being asked to talk about. If there's a character, if there's a context, if there's an issue, refer back to it. Try and include a theory. And, more than one is great, but at the very least, every 10 marker, if you can fit one in, and generally you can, try and apply a theory. And again, it's to demonstrate your knowledge, but also how you can apply a theory to a specific context. When you're writing, make your points specific. Be clear. When you're writing, what's the effect, the impact? What are you being asked to talk about? If it's a question about health issues, try to give specific health issues rather than saying, eating junk food's unhealthy. Give what's the effect. It will cause increased blood pressure, risk of heart attack, diabetes, cause a build-up of fatty tissue. And last but not least, always evaluate. And what I say by evaluate is, if the question is asking for problems, throw in some strengths. If it's about strengths, throw in some weaknesses. Try and produce a little bit of a balanced argument, recognizing that all these health issues, they're not always good, they're not always bad. It's a mixture of both. So it is kind of almost taking a little bit of that evaluative or to what extent approach with most questions. So I know this may not be as detailed, but as I say, if need be, I can try and produce some more before your exams. Hopefully this has been helpful and might give you a little bit of clarity and hopefully a bit of reassurance with the exam. If it is, that's fantastic. If just let me know in the comments if there's any specific things you'd like me to build on. Okay, thanks for watching and take care.